Hey everyone, Chris Sawyer here. The Varietal Show is back. I am sitting here not with a bottle of wine yet. I am sitting here with a great book. This book is the Signature Wines of Superior, California, and the author himself, Mike Dunne, is sitting next to me. Mike Dunne, hello. You guys, you know me so much for doing this show and really featuring great winemakers and winery owners and chefs and everything. Sometimes you just don't know the writing part about me and getting, having so many great experience with co-writers, and just people that we're peers of each other and we're friends and we have great times together. Mike Dunne is one of my favorite guys. Him and his wife Martha. I mean, we have so much fun judging wine competitions and just being friends. Aside from what we talk about with wine, we can just drink fine beverages off work, and we can do a lot of things. Mike, you are a very important person in my life just because I always enjoy seeing you and Martha so much. And this book is a big deal for us here in California and for everyone out there that likes wine, because Mike has been a great writer since really you started at the Sacramento Bee, and that's where we're at, Sacramento, California, the state capital. Warm area here. That's why I wanted to film us outside and just have a fun time. You and I judged the State Fair, and we've judged the San Francisco Chronicle. We've done so many, Sunset Magazine, all these things where we've had experiences together. We tell stories together because we were there. But one thing about you and the Sacramento Bee, which you started in 1978, you guys, is that you really weren't set to be a wine writer, but the wine industry started blossoming around us in 1978. It was a big year. Remember 1976, the Paris tasting? People started paying more attention to wine back then. Tell us a little bit about kind of how your path took you, especially with some of these stories in here, up to the Sierra Foothills, where we're really going to talk about Amador County and Calaveras County and El Dorado County that are a big part of this, especially the beginning of this book. They're so interesting. But what was it like back then, and what was that kind of moment and that said, I kind of think writing about wine's cool?
Yeah, well, I came at it into wine writing sort of sideways, because
Sideways?
until I was not particularly interested in wine or involved, certainly not involved in wine until the early 70s, and Martha and I and our three boys settled in Amador County in the Sutter Creek area, and I began stringing for a number of newspapers and magazines. And the Sacramento Bee, the editor of what was called the Superior California section, was hearing about people starting to develop vineyards and wineries in Amador and Calaveras, right. El Dorado. And it seems like with every tip that he got, he would ask me to check it out to see if this person had a story to tell, or why they were taking this risky venture on planting grapes and building a winery in an area that wasn't Napa, Sonoma, right. That wasn't known for its wines. At that time, there was only one winery in, basically one winery in Amador County, the old historic De Agostini winery. Right. But these new players were coming aboard, and I was being paid 35 cents a column inch.
35 cents
in the early 70s. So I made sure that I got long stories out of these farmers and winemakers, and that drew me into writing about.
I loved it where they did it by the inch instead of the word. That was very interesting. We always think about. You just would have written smaller words, because then it would make you more words, But yeah, I mean, I think back to my childhood in like the 70s and the 80s, and really growing up and watching my mom take me over the hill to Napa Valley, from Sonoma County. I mean, we had grapes there. Just the popularity of wine wasn't there. 76 Paris tasting was really helping that. But also my grandfather was from Calaveras County, so we would go up there to the Hogan Dam every year, and we'd go fishing, and I started to get to know the real gold rush country. And when you really think about the gold rush people, they were onto something back then, and it wasn't just gold. And I think that really one of the things about this is you kind of go through the whole story about what were they thinking back then. Well, a lot of these people didn't want to go into these caves. They really didn't like it down there, like going like hitting things, or just going out and like trying to put their little pans in the water and hope for gold. And some of them just said, you know what, there's a lot of people here, and you know what, they need to eat, they need to drink. and this is a really good idea. So let's plant some grapes and let's make some wine and sell it to these guys, since they were making money off the gold. And so the history was there, and then it just vanished, and then we come back in the 70s is kind of when it really was refueling right then.
Yes, you're right. There is, in the book, I do go into quite a bit of the history, the early history, which started with the gold rush.
Yep.
In fact, James Marshall, who discovered gold at Coloma in what is now El Dorado County, actually spent most of his time there as a farmer, as a carpenter and a farmer, and made wine, planted a vineyard, and he made casks for others who wanted to make wine at that time. And it boomed early on, very crudely, probably, very simply. And then as the gold played out and people drifted off to mainly urban areas and elsewhere, and the industry, the wine industry, couldn't really compete economically with what was started to go on at that time in the Central Valley, because they just could produce. It was easy to grow grapes there. They had great soil, they had plenty of water, and they could do it very economically compared to growing grapes and making wine, on the ridges and in the ravines and the foothills.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, when you go up to the foothills, there's a reason that granite's there. There's rocks. They're everywhere up there, and but we've also found out about really world-class wines is not in the easy places to grow it. You have to go to the places where there are rocks. You have to find rocky soils, not just sandy or clay-based soils. And you had all that down here in the the kind of the valley floor. But up there was special, and people were really on to something up there. And we know because we still have some of these great offerings of some of these old vine Zinfandels that were up there, like the Grand Pere vineyard, the 1868 vineyard, these kinds of things. These vines are still alive. If they could only talk to us, they would tell us some amazing stories especially about our culture. They've been watching us, these crazy things we did, like wagons and horses and stuff, and now we drive weird cars. And if they could only tell us the stories, but it doesn't happen that way. But you and I have a love for these areas up there, and we really go to El Dorado this year. This is going to be the 40-year anniversary of the El Dorado AVA, the American Viticultural Area up there. It's a special area. The Boger brand is one of them. It's a special one up there. What really what do you love about El Dorado? What's special about El Dorado that's so unique for you?
Well, I think that in writing the book, it's certainly about wine, but it's also a kind of an appreciation of the people who have been involved, who have taken these risks and developed the vineyards and the wineries. And when it comes to El Dorado specifically, it has several higher elevation vineyards, and it is rugged territory as much of the foothills is. But I think it's the chance that they took people like the Bogers and McCrady's. And the Bush family.
The Bush family, of course, at the highest. I mean, that's like 3,000 feet up there, and people were where they're at. And you really get into this, and you go, wow, these guys were, in some ways, you think crazy. But one thing that I have always noticed about these areas is, and especially there's the apple parts up there. So there's a kind of a rule almost, like when you can grow fruit trees in areas, you could probably grow grapes. And that area, that Apple Hill up there, is so interesting. People go, they come here from Sacramento, they go way up there, they go to buy apples and produce grown at 3,000 feet. It's crazy.
Right, and it's interesting that it is Apple Hill, and apples still are a major industry there, right alongside the vineyards. I think historically it's also known as the Fruit Ridge District, because it is on a ridge up there in the Camino area. And take Dick Bush, in founding the vineyard and the winery Madronia. He didn't know what to plant. I mean, he wasn't a farmer. He was a teacher and an engineer. And he came into the area, and he was being urged actually to plant maybe apples or Christmas trees. And he looked around and he saw these madrones, and he had, by his studies, had known that wherever, like in Napa and Sonoma, coastal areas, where there are madrones, there are in Manzanita there are vineyards that are doing well.
Yes.
So that clicked with him. So he put in the vineyard, and he planted everything. I mean, the usual suspects that are identified with the foothills, such as Zinfandel and Sauvignon Blanc, but also he just went way out on a limb with Gewürztraminer and Cabernet
and Nebbiolo, which is one of the great Italian grapes, and I mean, he grows it up there. And we've also seen, talking about Italian, I mean, Barbera. Barbera is a big grape up there now. It is like California's version of Italy as far as Barbera, one of the great grapes from the Alba region and these areas of Italy. And that area right there as a whole, not just El Dorado, but now we're talking about also crossing the next border over a little bit south of there is Amador County. And you've got Zinfandel, once again, you've got it there. Right. But Barbera is becoming so great up there. And I mean, they have whole Barbera fests up there, you guys, and they're fun. And you go there and you're like, wow, this is so cool. Yeah. I mean, don't you think that that's crazy? Like, that it's interesting because the Italians started coming in. They weren't really part of the big rush, the gold rush. It's interesting that the Italians weren't really here. It's really about the turn of last century when they started coming in. And you started going like, well, why didn't they bring a bunch of Sangiovese and Barbera with them? They kind of didn't, because Zinfandel was here, Petit Syrah was here, which is also very good up there. But you start going to the history, and like, this has really become something that's really special up there. You and I, we know a great brand up there in Amador County called Noceto. I love those guys, Vino Noceto, and that's where like I had the best Sangiovese I've ever had in the United States in some ways. And it's like they were bold, they were brave to plant that stuff up there. Why does it work?
Their story is great. Well, in their case, I agree. I think Vino Noceto makes the best Sangiovese in California. It's been a difficult grape in California, but and they started how many years? 40 or so years ago, and they have continued. And the reason I think they're successful with Sangiovese is that they continue to study it. They experiment with different clones, different sites, different blending regimens. They make any given vintage, they'll make a half dozen Sangioveses.
Oh, yeah.
They have their base one, which is the really reliable one that year after year, vintage after vintage, is a very reliable Sangiovese, best in California.
I agree. We're gonna also we gotta taste some wine, right, you guys? So this is Markus. We're gonna get into Lodi in just a second here, but I have to teach him my technique for opening this bottle. So he's gotta take a picture of me doing this. But this is for you guys at home. This will be like, you'll learn a lot from Mike Dunne. You got to read the book because that's how you really learn a lot from Mike Dunne. But sometimes you learn some stuff from me, huh? So so you take this. We always think is screw capping. You're supposed to screw it there. You actually do it at the neck, like that, and then you just roll it on your arm and just like take it off that way, So that's the way you really want to do it. You want to make it look cool. You want to make it so you're not pulling the cork out. You just want to pour this stuff and drink it. So it's so fun. So to you, Mike, and to this great book, let me offer a little cheer here. Cheers on that. Cheers. Cheers. We do have Martha sitting right there. Hi, Martha. She's one of my favorite people. She's one of my favorite humans, just like she is to him, too. But, this is a little bit of a selection from down here in the valley we start talking about. So we also had Calaveras County there that you talk about in the book, and some really great producers that you really kind of go into that help define these areas. And that's why Sierra Foothills, this is a great book about the Sierra Foothills. But then we come down to, the land here, and we really have to go back to Lodi. Lodi is really interesting. At one point, when I was a kid, it was like the watermelon capital of the world, and they had wine there. They definitely had some stuff, but it was being used in a lot of bulk kinds of wines. It wasn't really established yet. There weren't the wineries there. What happened there? How did that make the transition? What were some of those wineries that you have in the book that you really said, you know what, these guys helped make Lodi what it is today, and it's why you can find it on store shelves, great wine lists. What was really the defining factors about Lodi and why it became so special to us?
Yeah, I think it's I think it's an example in large part of again, grape growers and winemakers who had experience in Napa and Sonoma, wanted their own brands, their own properties, but they were priced out of those areas. So they looked around, and they were familiar because Napa actually imports a lot of Lodi fruit.
Yes, they do.
And,
yes, they do.
A whole lot. And so they knew that quality grapes could be grown in Lodi. And so they drifted there. There are people like Tegan Pasalacqua, there Marcus
Stud.
Bogus,
Yeah.
Marcus Nigley, and
Even Mondavi and the Woodbridge and things like that. You know, like using that and saying, you know what, I believe in this area. Let's make high quality. You know, not going to be the price points of $150 for a Cabernet, but we can do things here. They're
Right.
very good.
And they've brought a new winemaking approach with them, and many new grape
Yeah.
varieties. I mean, Zinfandel is still king in Lodi, and they've a lot of the younger, newer people,
Yeah.
not necessarily
Yeah.
younger, but newer players on the Lodi scene have taken. They respect Zinfandel, and they've applied gentler techniques, refine their winemaking, and as a result, the Zinfandel, much of the Zinfandel coming out of Lodi now is much more stylish, approachable, more transparent, more layered. A very good Zinfandel, better Zinfandel than ever probably is coming out of Lodi now, but also they're introducing new grape varieties, Pickbull and I mean, even Gewürztraminer, small amounts but exciting. And Sauvignon Blanc is growing.
It's
in
becoming
esteem.
cool there. I mean, it's like, you know, it's a warm area. I mean, it is warm. You know, it's near some rivers there, and you really want to have some of that white wine. I mean, this one's great. I mean, this is a blend here of Kerner, a Bacchus, Riesling, some Gewürztraminer. You've got all these things in this. Kerner is like a grape that hardly anyone knows anything about, but it's really this amazing German grape, German-Austrian grape. And you're like, oh, wow, that's so cool. And there's an older man that brought this kind of cutting over there. And the same thing with Marcus, and like he brings his class and style there. And you've got some people that are doing such interesting things. But you go back to the variety there. I mean, you get Michael David, who's really known for Zinfandel, but you know, he's also making Cabernet Franc and crazy stuff like this with a different brand. You've got great people like you know, Mike McKay, who's like so passionate about Zinfandel, but you know, they're just making these kinds of quality Zinfandels, and they just don't make one, they make a bunch, clinker brick, things like that. These great old properties that had old vines, they're learning a lot of new techniques now too.
Well, you mentioned Michael David, and the book basically is built around 50 wines that I think represent character, quality, and value in the greater Sacramento area, including Lodi and the Foothills, the Delta, and Yolo. Michael David is known for pretty substantial red wines, Zinfandels and so forth.
Seven Deadly Sins.
But the two,
and the earthquake and these kinds of names that you've seen on store shelves.
Ink block names that suggest the
block.
mass and the power of their wines. But in the book, I single out two of their wines to highlight, and one of them is a Symphony.
Oh yeah.
A grape that is not cultivated very extensively, but it is a very distinctive grape, very
aromatic.
popular in the tasting room. And then the other one is Chardonnay. Chardonnay is not necessarily associated with Lodi up to this point, but I think Michael David, among others, are doing really well with the Chardonnay, and it's growing in stature.
I think so too. And you know, since we're getting kind of back to just kind of follow up, we're just trying to give you guys, we're just trying to wet your whistle, so you have to read the book, get it, and then you have to visit these areas, get it. You know, so these are all the kinds of things we're talking about. Closer to us right here, Clarksburg. We've got Clarksburg. One of the areas where, you know, a lot of, I'll tell you the story right on one of them is Charles Krug Winery. I mean, where did they get Chenin Blanc was big, you guys. Back in the Riesling and Chenin Blanc were the white wines, and they were the wines that most people were drinking back in the 70s. And Chenin Blanc is kind of come back in style, and it's really special. But where was Napa getting it? They were getting it from Clarksburg. And so here it is. We're just like a few miles from Clarksburg when we're sitting here. You know, this is near the zoo here in Sacramento, but just right down the road is Clarksburg, and it's really an interesting area. What makes it special?
It's cool. It's got special soils,
Delta,
very rich.
Delta influence. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it is the Delta. It's a series of channels and streams and islands. islands that are some of them, some vineyards are basically underwater,
Yep.
and they're dry, but
Yep.
they're below sea level,
Right.
protected by these levees. So the soils are very organic, very rich, but they also have layers or an infusion of minerals
Yep.
washed down from the Sierra. But as a consequence, Chenin Blanc is one of their stars, and Petit Syrah do
Petit Syrah.
exceptionally well. And Chenin Blanc is coming back. New winemakers discovering it, rediscovering it, planting more of it in the Delta. They recognize that it is a very transparent grape.
Yeah.
It shows where it's grown, much like Riesling
Yeah.
does.
Yep.
But back in the 50s, when Chenin Blanc was very popular, it was very popular because that was the era of sweet wine.
Yep.
And it was made in a sweet style. Today's style tends to be dry. And there's still wineries coming in from outside to take advantage, to tap the Delta for Chenin Blanc. And one in the book is Dry Creek Vineyard.
Yep.
Makes a Clarksburg Chenin Blanc.
From the Wilson vineyard, you know.
Yes.
The Wilson family,
Yeah.
you know, and you get into these things like there's Harmeyer, which is like kind of a new hipster guy. We love Craig Harmeyer, and he's such a neat guy. And you have like Silt, which is a kind of a
Right.
family-based brand that kind of came out of there. So we're learning a lot about Clarksburg, and there's my great friends, the Lambeths, who are growing Albarino there, and Petit Syrah and Tempranillo and things like this are really working there. And I think it's a lot of the science. Like we're here for the Unified, and that's why I'm here in your town this week. It's like all these new innovational things, and even like sometimes it's just which way the rose face. I mean, we're learning so much about.
You're here for Unified? I thought you came to see me.
I see you
And
at
Martha.
Unified. Of course I do. I'm here for him. You know it.
I'm
but
shocked.
I know. But Unified was pretty great. We were there yesterday together. Come on.
Yeah.
Now. But you know,
Did you get
it's
some of
just.
those toothpicks?
Yeah, exactly. we were just there for free food and wine, so whatever.
Pens. They're crazy about pens.
Yeah.
Got more ball. I'm set for the rest of the year.
Yeah. But you know, you've got, Rick Cushman is like writing on the back here, you know, our great friend writes the back, and you know, you dedicate the book to Martha in here. You've got like Daryl Cordy, one of the legends of this whole area that really was like a special person. But I love for Martha, with whom the glass is always full. I believe in that. She is so amazing. She's sitting right over there, and I'm kind of pointing at her, but she's awesome. I love you, girl. But this book is really cool, you guys. I am a Californian by heart. I've been here 7th generation. Well, my son is the 7th generation. And, you know, how lucky are we to live in this area? But